Hey everybody, this is Carissa Keister from Stillwater Area Public Schools, home of the ponies, and you are listening to Pony Voices. On this show, we celebrate the amazing people of Stillwater schools and give you an insider's view of what is happening across our district. Not only is our mascot unique, so are our stories. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfy, and settle in for our latest episode. It's legislative season, and all eyes are on the Capitol, where Minnesota lawmakers are debating the very best way to invest billions of dollars from this year's budget surplus. School leaders have been very hopeful that some of the surplus will find its way to our districts. And while there's a lot of talk about significant funding increases for education, there's a rising concern that some of this may be overshadowed by new laws that could actually cost our schools millions of dollars. Today we're talking with Superintendent Mike Funk about some of the good ideas that are being discussed at the Capitol that, if left unfunded, could actually add up to big-time financial problems for our school district.
Yeah, there's a unique situation happening in Minnesota right now. In this era of divided government, we actually have a House, a Senate, and a governor who are all from the same party. So many times over the last number of years, there's been a lot of obstruction and not a lot of progress in getting things done at the Capitol. This year, however, with all the two houses and the governor all controlled by the Democratic Party, there's lots of things happening and a lot of focus on education. And so in a lot of ways that's good, but also in some ways it's concerning because there's a lot of ideas that are popping up. And since there are really one-sided government at this point, some of these ideas are not necessarily a good thing for education from a financial angle. And that's really the concern I've got as a superintendent here.
Well, let's dig into that. I mean, we can talk about some of the interesting things. I know you're a former political science teacher, civics teacher, so I'm sure you have a lot of insight on what's happening. But let's talk about the concerns that you have. I know you spoke to the school board about this recently.
Yeah, so, I think that there's a lot of really good ideas that are coming forward from the legislature that, addressing some needs that have existed for a long time. My concern from an administrative angle, for my first charge as a superintendent is to make sure that we run an organization with a balanced budget, and we owe that to our taxpayers. So when we have mandates potentially coming down the pike that have significant cost to them, that really impacts how we operate. It impacts how we can pay for services for our teachers, and ultimately it impacts what's happening with our students. Because if we're having to pay for some of these mandates that aren't directly related to how we serve our students, that shortchanges them in the end. So that's very, very concerning. And so I'll just talk with the first one. The first one that's popped up is something called really changing the retirement date for fully funded retirement from age 65 for people who are members of the Teachers Retirement Association to age 60 with 30 years of service. Now, for me, I'm not 60 yet. Personally, that's a great thing. I see, wow, that's really good. And systemically, I can understand why teachers would want it. I mean, it would be hard to have to teach to 65. So I understand the why behind it. My concern with it is it's about an extra cost to the district of $153 per student. And when we have roughly 8,200 students in the district, that's a lot of money that we would have to be paying so that teachers could retire earlier statewide. So I understand the concept. I support the concept. My concern is there's no funding coming with the potential mandate, and that's really the concern I've got for a number of the potential mandates coming forward. We've got another one that talks about minimum wage for for employees being $25 an hour. Conceptually, I think that's a great idea. I think the better we can pay our staff, the more long-term stability we'll have as an organization. However, there's no funding that is coming with that. It's just here's a potential mandate which we would like you to do. And I think Minneapolis just this past year, I think they went to $25 an hour, and now Minneapolis is staring at a fiscal cliff, I believe, next year, because this will be not sustainable. And my concern here is not only for Stillwater, but for globally within the state of Minnesota, what would some of these things do to school districts in the long term? I think we're in a unique situation right now because we do have a really large surplus that we can spend, and that surplus can pay for a lot of things. But I have been a superintendent since 2005, and I've seen most years we get 2% extra dollars to pay for cost. And we're going to go back to that in probably 2 years' time here. And yet, suddenly, if we get some of these mandates put in, which are some good ideas, we're not going to be able to afford it as a school district. And our kids and our local communities will be impacted by this.
I think that's important, that sustainability piece that you talk about. I mean, yes, we have the money now, but what happens in 2, 3, 4 years when we don't, but we're still having to incur these costs of, $500 a student here and $150 here.
And another one is, and it's not directly related to education, but it's more of a statewide concern, is it would require businesses to allow employees up to 24 weeks off per year. They'd get 12 weeks of paid medical leave, and then they could take 12 weeks of paid family leave. And this would essentially be paid for with a new payroll tax. So we would be paying a portion of the payroll tax. I think our employees would be required to pay a portion of it. And then employees would receive up to 90% of their wages while they are out. And so in theory, really, yep, I understand the need and the concept of it. But there's a cost to doing that for the school district. And the other piece that they don't talk about here is, as a school system, when we have a teacher out, we have to hire another teacher to be in the classroom. And there's no funding tied to that at all as well. So, again, that is just the concern I've got is they're trying a one-size-fit-all approach to fixing some of these long-term issues, and they're not looking at the long-term sustainability of them. But overall, I mean, there's a few other things in here, but overall, we're looking at about a total, if we were to total up all the unfunded mandates, of over $1,800 per student. And so for Stillwater, that would equate to about an $8.5 million shortfall of funding. Now, they're talking about giving us some new revenue over the next couple years here, but we're still about $1,000 short. But they're adding about $800 of new revenue, and if these mandates were all implemented, we'd be paying for $1,800 of them. Now, do I think these are all going to be implemented? No, I do not. But I think it's an important thing that people know that they're going to hear sometime in the next couple months, school districts are getting an influx of new dollars, more than we've gotten since I've been a superintendent. However, the concern I have is they're not going to hear a lot of talk about what potentially new mandates that we have that may take some of this money we're receiving to have to pay for some of these other pieces. So I think it's important for the public to know that.
I want to hit those numbers again because I just want to make sure that people really hear what you just said. So we're looking at probably the highest increases we've had from the state on the general education formula, and that's fantastic. So that's like $841, I think you said, per student that would be coming in from new money. But what was that number again that you said as far as what new mandates could cost?
Yeah, so the mandates and again, and this is also taking into account, we have contractual agreements that we will have to pay moving forward. So between the mandates of about 1,600, our contractual agreements, the total we're looking at is an $1,853 shortfall. So then we combine that with the new revenue of $841. The overall shortfall is $1,034 per pupil.
So $1,034,000. So we're looking at $8.5 million annual shortfall.
Right.
Okay.
On a $150 million budget. So that is and that's just that will be ongoing. I mean, that's just year one, and with no new promises of significant revenue in the following biennium. So again, I don't see all of these coming to fruition. Some of them might, and I think the biggest thing I want folks to know is we will be receiving new funding from the state of Minnesota, but we will also be having new mandates that will take away some of this funding. So when you hear that there's an influx of new cash into school systems, yes, but there's also potentially new cost associated with that.
So as a parent or a community member, the legislative session's still underway. There's still conversation happening. Is there anything that you would encourage families to do right now at this point?
Yeah, I would just two things. I mean, I would reach out to your representatives and say, we're appreciative of all the new funding that is potentially coming the way for public schools in Minnesota. And again, we've been shortfall of funding for years and years and years. So this is really good. So we're appreciative of that. But I would also encourage people to be cautious of the new mandates, because mandates have funding attached to them that doesn't always follow. So I think that's important. So provide us the funding, and please stop the unfunded mandates. I think those are the two messages that I would bring forward.
I love how you summed it all up in those two key messages. These are simple messages that anyone, whether they're a parent or a teacher, a staff member, or a citizen, can easily help carry out to our local legislators. So thank you for joining me today. Really appreciate how you helped us all understand how these conversations that are happening at the Capitol will really impact our kids right here in Stillwater schools. Also, a big thank you to our listeners. I would encourage all of you to reach out to your local legislators and thank them for supporting education, and just remind them how unfunded mandates can really have an impact on our schools and take resources away from our kids. If you enjoyed this episode of Pony Voices, please share it with your friends and neighbors, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast to make sure you never miss an episode. Until next time, go Ponies!
SDR